Thanks for being with us. Giants getting ready for their first playoff game since 2016, Lance. Very exciting. Big Blue Kickoff Live brought to you by Pepsi Zero Sugar. New and improved. Zero never tasted so good. And it feels like the entire building has been drinking a lot of Pepsi Zero Sugar this week, Lance. It's on fire. People are excited. They got a lot of energy. They're ready to go. And it's a long time coming. But at the same time, I've been in the locker room every day this week. It feels like any other game. Guys playing ping pong, guys joking around, going in and out. And I think that's exactly what Brian Daboll wants. He is the king of keep the regular. And based on what I've seen, which is obviously very limited, I'm not out there at practice every day. We're not allowed to be. I think it seems like he's accomplished that goal for whatever that's worth.
Well, he's been preaching that all season long, John, so why stop now, right, at this point? And I think a lot of the roster's young. I don't really think these guys know any different other than going through the protocols and everything else that they've had to follow over the course of this season. So I think that they've been pretty steady as a result of that, and they buy into what Brian Daboll is selling. And I think players in NFL history that have gotten in trouble or have had some rough performances, specifically quarterbacks, I think it's a product of them actually trying to do too much and maybe thinking outside of just a regular game. So you go out to Minnesota, you were there a few weeks ago, and you don't act any different and let the best team win based on the level of execution. Because both of these teams, we've been throwing out the numbers all week. We threw out the numbers a few weeks ago. They've combined for 19 wins in one-score contests. I'd be stunned if this game becomes a lopsided affair.
Though I will say this. The Vikings have had 2 games this year, 3 if you want to count the first half against the Colts, but they came back.
Sure.
Where things have gotten away from them a little bit. We talked about this yesterday a little bit.
Cowboys game, too.
And the Packers game.
Yeah.
And then the first half against the Lions. So I feel like if you get the Vikings offense all off kilter early, sometimes it's hard for them to kind of get on track in the second half. Now, they did against Detroit. They didn't manage that against the Packers and Dallas. But I'm with you. I don't see that happening in this game. And the Giants have only won 1 game all year by more than 1 score. And that was the game against the Colts. And I think the Colts might have had to stamp on the envelope at that point of the year, to be quite honest with you. But though they almost beat the Texans in the final week of the year, so maybe not. But I'm with you. I think this is going to be another tight game, and frankly, whichever team has the ball last might win the game. I mean, that's kind of how it went last time, right?
That's exactly how it went last time.
The Giants had the ball. They were going to punt. The Vikings blocked the punt, score the touchdown. Giants get it back. They go down and score a touchdown. The Vikings get it back. They go and score the field goal.
It's the recipe for both of these teams. That's what really has allowed them to get to the playoffs. They won a lot of these close games. They've been able to execute down the stretch in the fourth quarter. Listen, the separation between most teams in the NFL is minute to begin with, so I don't think the Vikings and Giants are showing us or demonstrating anything that we don't know, but it's very unusual to see the high volume of games that have ended that way. With respect to both of these teams, the Vikings, they set a record, 11 one-score games. They won all of them.
And the Vikings have 4 more wins than the Giants, but their point differentials are almost identical.
Yeah, what, -6, -3.
Yeah, exactly.
They're right in the same ballpark. And that's what happens when you play all of these close games. Now, also what's hurt the Vikings is that lopsided loss to Dallas really screwed up the point differential, even though the majority of the games have been close.
That was almost like a -37. What was that, 40 to 3 or
43,
something?
Yeah. They just absolutely got clobbered. And then, the Giants have also had some games that got away from them in terms of the Cowboys,
game,
too.
Mostly.
The Eagles game, too. Now, the Colts game helped make up for the deficit.
Yeah, they were like -27 going into that Colts game,
I believe
right?
they were -28 on the nose, and then they won by 28 to completely wipe it out. Yeah, right, so it worked out from a mathematical standpoint. But, that's why I guess both of these teams are good examples of maybe point differential doesn't truly tell the whole story, because you could have, John, based on what we've just described, you could have really one bad lopsided game.
Sure.
And doesn't that maneuver the numbers in a way where everything else has been relatively close, and you're like, well, why is this team in the playoffs if they have a point differential of -20? Well, one bad game, that's going to do it for you.
Yeah, and that's why you have to look at the season in totality, obviously. Yeah. Few things I want to get to here, Lance. We did a lot of the X's and O's stuff with Casillas yesterday. I want to throw a couple things at you. And I'm one that likes to look at total numbers. I think they do tell a broader story that is oftentimes accurate. And the Vikings did move the ball against the Giants in that game, right? Kirk Cousins threw for 299 yards. And I talked about this with Chris Sims on the Giants Huddle podcast. They had over 350 yards, total in the game, the Vikings, 353 net. And they scored 27 points. That's one of the higher point totals the Giants have allowed this year. With that said, if you could promise me today the Giants defense will give you that same performance that they did in that first game in this game, I honestly think I'll take it. They got put in a short field situation off the block punt, which I think, caused some issues. Obviously, they got to score without having to march the field. They only had one play, not pass play, one play of 25 yards or more, a 25-yard completion to Justin Jefferson. They had no other plays of 20 or more yards. The Vikings want to make big plays. They're a big play team.
Sure.
And they were not able to make a lot of big plays against this Giants defense. And I think if you can force them to have those slow, methodical, navigating drives up and down the field, we saw it in this other game, right? Kirk Cousins will throw the ball into coverage. He will trust, with good reason a lot of the time because they're really good,
Yeah.
He will trust his wide receivers and T.J. Hawkinson to make plays in coverage, and your defense will have a chance to make a play. They don't have their starting right tackle. Maybe Kayvon Thibodeau, Azeez Ojulari can get home more, get a forced fumble or something like that. I feel like I will accept if the Giants defense plays as well as they did in that first matchup in this game. I think the Giants have a real good chance to win this game, assuming the offense can cut out all those turnovers and the block punt that they had on special teams.
Well, especially the two in Minnesota territory, because it's not just a killer you lost the ball, you lost points. You could have at least maybe tacked on a few field goals under those circumstances. And now maybe Minnesota needs a touchdown as opposed to a field goal on that final drive. The other thing that I think gets overlooked in this game, 28 of the 51 points came in the fourth quarter. This was a 13-10 game entering the fourth. Mm-hmm. It really became more of a clinic in the final quarter where both teams started to pick things up. But I think for the most part, it was more of a grinded-out type of affair through the first three quarters. Now, part of that, of course, was the Giants missing out on opportunities to not finish drives, and the Vikings did not have a lot of explosive plays, but Justin Jefferson and T.J. Hawkinson in the end still finished with over 100 yards. They had double digits in catches, and they combined for 3 touchdowns. Now, Irv Smith Jr. is back for the Vikings. He's an intriguing option for them because you could use him as a blocker as well as a guy in the middle of the field. So what type of role does he play? He just came back off of IR. He missed nearly 10 games with an ankle issue. And then Garrett Bradbury is another factor in play for the Vikings. You mentioned Brian O'Neill is out at right tackle, but Bradbury's their starting center. He didn't play the last 5, including the game against the Giants. I'll go so far, John, to say that if you combine the Giants' injured players and the Vikings' injured players, I think the return of Bradbury may be the most influential piece of personnel. And the reason say that...
if Jackson's back, I'll make that argument.
I don't know if Jackson's going to play a full game, though, even if he's back.
That's fair.
And that's why I put him behind Bradbury. But the reason why I'd give Bradbury the edge over Jackson is the Giants attacked the interior of the Vikings' offensive line in that first matchup. Dexter Lawrence had a sack. They had 4 overall, 11 quarterback hits. Bradbury can help solidify what is a weak spot for the Vikings. So that's a trouble area. The tackles handled their business in that first game. Now, I know Brian O'Neill's not there. I get that. But Bradbury, the center touches the ball on every single play. People talk about the quarterback touches the ball. The center touches the ball. You need to have that smooth transition between the center and the quarterback. So I'll say the return of Bradbury, and he did get a full practice in yesterday. We'll see what happens today. Everything seems to be trending in the positive direction. That is a huge addition for the Vikings offensive line.
Especially the way Dexter Lawrence dominated that first game. I know he had no sacks, but it was, and I've said this like the 4th time I'm saying it this week, so I apologize for being repetitive. It was one of the most dominating 0-sack performances I've seen. He was in the backfield every play. Poor Austin Schlottman did not have a chance. He got utterly demolished in that game. He ended up, I think, broke his ankle the following week, which is bad for him.
Yeah, he's out for the season. Yeah.
And Chris Reed, I thought, has actually done a pretty decent job since he's come in for Schlottman. But it looks like Bradbury's going to play, and I think this is an interesting matchup now too, Lance, because much like Jason Kelce, and we talked about this heading into the Eagles game, and I talked to Andre Patterson about this when the assistant coaches spoke today. He actually compared him to like a Travis Kelce type of player. Jason Kelce, pardon me, not Travis. Jason Kelce type of player, where he's a smaller, mobile, smart, athletic center. And Jason Kelce did a good job against Dexter Lawrence when they've played this year. Well, how does Bradbury handle Lawrence? A guy that has really learned to leverage his size and length this year against a smaller center. we'll see if Dexter can have that type of performance like he did in the first match. And if he can't, can they make up for it attacking Eli Udoh at right tackle? Or Brannick might come back this week, too. He's a guy that backed up Darisaw at left tackle earlier in the year. He was designated to return from injured reserve. We don't know if he's going to play yet either. Can Thibodeau or Ojulari make up for some of that stuff? Dexter maybe doesn't give you inside over the right tackle spot, where Udoh doesn't give up a ton of sacks, but he commits a billion penalties. 17
when he played guard,
the
previous season.
And look, and working in space, that's probably not going to get any easier. So, you're in a phone booth, it's probably a little bit easier in there. So we'll see how he does that at right tackle. So I think that'll be a couple of interesting matchups that I think you have to keep an eye on in this game. And then Leonard Williams, I still like him against their two guards, Ezra Cleveland and Ed Ingram. I didn't think those two guys played particularly well in the first matchup, so I think that's another spot where you can pinpoint the Giants have an advantage. He had 2 sacks in that first game, Leonard Williams. And while he wasn't as dominant as Dexter Lawrence, I thought he also played a very strong game.
Yeah, that's why the return of Bradbury I keep going back to, because as you just emphasized what I mentioned, the interior of that Vikings offensive line is a question mark, and if you get back somebody that has been in the league for several seasons and also has been a stabilizing force, I think that could go a long way, because the biggest storyline in this game, and I know you mentioned that the defense gives you what happened in the first matchup. You'll take that, John. But I still think the onus is on the Giants offense in a game like this. You got to be able to match what the Vikings are able to put up. There's been a fairly consistent scoring team, and you're not going to slow down Justin Jefferson, meaning you're not going to eliminate him from the picture. He's going to get his plays. He's going to get his yardage, and whether or not that translates to touchdowns remains to be seen. So you're going to have to find a way to impact Kirk Cousins. You impact Kirk Cousins, you then slow down the level of production of Justin Jefferson. So that comes back to play in the trenches. And if you can get 11 quarterback hits and 4 sacks, sure, the Giants, they'll sign up for that. Wink will take that because you figure, okay, you're taking a toll on Kirk and company. But here's the crazy thing. Even with those numbers, you still had 2 guys over 100 yards and 3 touchdowns, which just goes to show you, where the Vikings are in terms of their passing attack. And here's the other reason why playing the trenches is so key. Everybody's wondering, well, will Dalvin Cook be showcased a little bit more in this game? Because he only had 14 carries for 64 yards. So yardage per carry was good. They just didn't highlight him much.
And by the way, that's been a theme for the Vikings all year on offense. Kevin O'Connell, I feel like he runs the football because he's there and he has to, but he doesn't really want to run it from what I can tell.
100%. Well, he comes from the Rams school of thought, and the Rams were the same way. I mean, they're throwing the ball 64% of the time, John. That's the 3rd highest rate in the NFL. So I would be, once again, surprised if this becomes, well, let's give it to Dalvin to run for 30 times. Now, granted, if they're winning in the game, maybe that changes O'Connell's philosophy. Game flow always is going to influence, but they're going to come out and they're going to look to test this Giants secondary and this Giants pass rush with respect to all of their weapons, because once again, they've got Irv Smith now. KJ Osborne didn't have a monster game. He's a quiet guy, and even Adam Thielen was extremely quiet.
1 catch.
Yeah, only had 1 catch. So, do they try to spread the wealth and test the Giants secondary in other areas? These are the subtle ways that I'm looking at in terms of maybe how game flow changes, but we know the personnel. These teams are familiar with one another. If the Giants, once again, win the battle in the trenches, I think they'll put themselves in a good position to at least dictate the tone of the game.
Yeah, and I'll throw one other thing out there, too, before we get to your calls at 201-939-4513. The Giants played as much zone and 2-deep zone than they have in any game this year against the Vikings in their first matchup. They broke a lot of their tendencies that way. They still blitzed a lot, but they played a lot more zone, and I think that took the Vikings by surprise a little bit. So if you get McKinney and Jackson back, do the Vikings stick with that game plan? Do they keep playing a little bit more zone? Or did they play that mostly to protect their young set of cornerbacks?
I'd go with the latter a bit.
Yeah. So are we going to see more pressure? Kirk Cousins did a pretty decent job against the blitz in that
Very
first
good
game.
job, yeah.
He had 2 touchdown passes. He had a couple plays into the game. Again, you didn't get those big explosive plays over the top, but he handled it fairly well in that game. Over the course of the year against the blitz, he has not been nearly as good. So how do the Giants then balance that? Do they change their tendencies? And then I'll bring it back to you, Lance, for the Giants offense. You talked about how you think the Vikings are going to stick with the pass-heavy attack, right? What do the Giants do? They drop back to throw 52 times in that game against the Vikings on Christmas Eve. They ran it 17. It was the biggest or widest ratio of run pass than they've had in any game all year long. You can throw on this Vikings secondary. They're porous. Daniel Jones had his best game of the year. But do they try to be a little bit more balanced in this game? Because look, Saquon only had 14 carries. He still ran for 80 yards. His 6 yards per carry, Lance, was his second best yards per carry of the year, going back to the first game of the year in Tennessee. So if the Giants want to run it more, I feel confident they can. If they want to throw it more, I feel confident that they can. But I would bet, let's say they run 70 plays again, just to throw out a number. My guess it's going to be closer to like 40 dropbacks, 30 runs, then it's going to be 52-17. You know what I mean? I think you're going to trend a little bit more towards, 55-45 than 66%, which is really kind of off the reservation a little bit.
Barkley also had 8 receptions in that game too. Mm-hmm. So he had a lot of touches, and you give your running back touches. I think that's maybe a little bit more key than running the ball. But
I agree. And a lot of those passes were like those little swing passes, which are kind of an extension of the running
game. It's 100% an extension of the run game. Though, I don't think it's a coincidence, though, that the 2 games that Daniel Jones has gone over 300 yards and has gone into the 40 attempt territory, they've lost both of those games.
And they've had turnover issues in both those games.
They lost to the Lions, they lost to the Vikings. A number I've always thrown out, and I'll say it again, they're 9-0-1 when they have at least 30 rushing attempts. They're 0-7 when they don't. Now, some people have come back, well, they should run the ball 30 times on the first 30 plays of the game. No, of course, it depends on having success on the ground game. But I don't think that's coincidental either. So I would say, to answer your question, if you're the Giants, the recipe to beat the Vikings, whether you're having success or not, is not to have Daniel Jones get into that 40-plus pass territory because it has not yielded good results.
And the Vikings did a good job getting to him in that last game, too. Danielle Hunter was in the backfield a lot.
Yeah. He had 2 sacks.
I thought they got rid of the ball pretty quickly in that game, and they did protect well at other times. But, the right side of the Giants' offensive line had some issues in that first game, and I want to see how they handle it in this contest with, Hunter, Zadarius Smith. We'll see how they handle that pass rush. But it should be, look, I'm with you. I think it should be a close game. I think we'll be on pins and needles and on our tippy toes in that fourth quarter, seeing how this thing's going to go. I think, the Giants have a real good chance to win the game, but they could easily lose the game too. They certainly can't turn it over like they did in the previous matchup if they want to win this game. I think that's for sure. And, look, I'm with you. I think it's a coin toss game to me. Whichever team plays a better brand of football is probably going to come out and win the game. I don't see a huge mismatch either way. There are easily, we talk about paths to victory. There are multiple paths for both teams to walk away with a win in this game. There's multiple ways for both teams to do it. They can do it, and we'll see which team comes out and simply plays better. And I think given these two teams played each other, they're more familiar with each other. They played only 3 weeks ago. You see these in like NBA playoff series, right? The more and more these teams play each other, the better team tends to come out on top at the end because you see each other more and more. So I think, you see this team again, the better coach team and the team with the better players is the team that's going to, the cream rises to the top, right?
Well, the way you look at the breakdown is I think the Vikings have the better offense. The Giants have the better defense.
Oh, well, that's for sure. The Vikings defense is not very good.
The Vikings defense has veteran players. They have certain guys up front. You mentioned Danielle Hunter, Zadarius Smith, who got some rest last week. They didn't play him. He's trying to overcome a knee issue, and Harrison Smith got rest too. He's dealing with a knee issue, and Patrick Peterson had the interception off of Daniel Jones. I think they have a really good linebacking core, but they're not a shutdown unit. The Giants move the ball. A lot of teams have moved the ball, but they are opportunistic, and that goes back to if you put the ball in the air a lot of times, you're going to give Minnesota a chance to make some plays. That's more of a reason why I don't think the recipe for victory is to have Daniel Jones throw the ball 40-some-odd times.
Peterson and Harrison Smith specifically.
Yeah, those guys have 10 interceptions. They got 5 apiece. Mm-hmm. They've got 25 takeaways on the season, 15 of which are interceptions. This team has made up for its shortcomings in yardage by taking away the ball.
And by the way, Jones did get strip sacked in that first game, too. The Giants just happened to recover it.
Yeah. Well, and there have been a few times this season, by the way, in which that's happened. And remember, you don't put that as a negative because it doesn't reflect on a turnover or a lost fumble because it was recovered. But there's a lot of things that have to go right under those circumstances. So, you put the mirror image of these teams up against one another. There's a lot of similarities. I think that if you go back to the first game, you referenced the turnovers. I would say this. And this was actually, I think, part of our fact or fiction statements that we responded to this week, which you can check out on Giants.com. I think it's more important for the Giants to avoid turnovers in this game than have a takeaway.
We answered the question. I didn't even look at your answer.
You did? Okay.
But that means we answered the question the exact same way. I wrote the exact same thing.
That was the rationale behind my response. Okay, so great minds think alike. But that's how I responded to that because the way it was worded was about, like, do they need to have multiple
The Giants
takeaways,
need to have multiple
right?
takeaways to win the
And
game, correct?
I don't look at it that way. I mean, also, if you look at the trends this season, they've won games where they've only had one takeaway.
Like, I feel good about
it.
If you tell me right now the Giants walk out of this game, they're even in turnover ratio, I feel pretty good about winning the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with you. But if the Vikings have +1, +2 in turnover differential.
If you get the +2 territory, you're probably not going to win.
Yeah, and I'll throw in the special teams issue on that.
Sure.
It doesn't count statistically, which I don't understand why. Maybe they should readjust that. But the Giants, they had 3 turnovers because you gave the Vikings unbelievable field position as a result of that block punt.
That led to the game tying, the go-ahead touchdown in the fourth quarter.
So that was a turnover because, yes, you could argue you could have flipped field position, but where you gift-wrapped them to take over, they were already in field goal range.
Oh, you handed them 45 yards.
So, I mean, you handed them 3 points right there at worst.
Correct.
You can't do that. You can't do that on top of the conventional turnovers. So that, to me, and I understand stating ball security is the most obvious trend in football. Yes, I get that. But when we're talking about teams where there's not a lot of separation, sometimes you have to highlight the obvious. It's critical for the Giants to avoid turnovers as opposed to being opportunistic and take away the ball from the Vikings in this game.
With the 100%. Go subscribe to the Giants Huddle podcast, everybody. Boy, we put a slew of shows up this week. You go back, you have the most recent episode. I don't think the Friday one's up yet, Pearson, but the one that's up there right now is my interview with Kevin Burkhardt, the number one analyst on Fox, or play-by-play guy with Fox, pardon me. He's calling the game on Sunday for Fox at 4:30. That is now the next to last episode on there because the Friday episode is up. I had a one-on-one with Leonard Williams. He talks a lot about his stinger injury, actually, and, making the playoffs for the first time. Really good stuff from Leonard in that. Check that out. Lance and Paul have a preview with Pete Burtzich, who calls the games on the radio. He's their radio analyst for the Vikings. Bob Papa with Brian Dable. We have that. That's up there right now. Then go back 2 or 3 episodes ago. I talked to Chris Sims, and, he brings out his notebook, literally. He's going through his notes in the podcast. He rewatched the first game on Christmas Eve, and some of the stuff we talked about today, Lance, breaks down a lot of from a quarterback's perspective, the eccentricities and the details of what happened in that first game and what they might do differently here in the game coming up on Sunday. And he was with us, by the way. He thought they should lean into Saquon a little bit more, and that's from a quarterback, right? And,
sure.
and not lean into throwing it that many times. I thought he had a great line. So make sure you go check that in the Giants Huddle podcast, Giants.com, the mobile app, the Giants mobile app, or go to Giants.com/podcast, search for Giants Huddle, subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. He said the Vikings, this is basically his quote. So Vikings, if you're listening, this isn't me saying this. Go yell at Chris Sims, not me. The Vikings are so bad on defense, you could pretty much do whatever you want against them. So don't let the fact that they struggle in the secondary make you get out of how you want to play. Play the way you want to play, because the Vikings really aren't, frankly, very good at stopping much of anything.
Oh, look at the standings and look at the rankings. Yeah, it's not pretty in terms of where they finish up statistically. That's why the takeaways have been a savior for them at times.
And their red zone
defense
defense has been okay, and their third down defense has been good at times as well.
Yeah. Now, the other thing that's noticeable...
And no big plays, too. They don't give a lot of big plays over the top either.
Well, and that's why, if you go back to that first game, the Giants attacked the middle of the field.
All game.
It was a field day for Isaiah Hodgins, Richie James, Daniel Jones over the middle. And then, try to make a manageable third down.
Crossers,
or convert.
slants, in routes, all that
now,
stuff.
does Minnesota make an adjustment from that standpoint? Do they try to tease the Giants into trying to take a deep shot?
And I think we saw that late. Remember on the Giants' next to last possession, they tried that little in-cut to Isaiah Hodgins on a third down. I think it was Jordan Hicks, if I recall, came over right after the Hodgins jumped to catch the ball, and Hicks came in, and he put his helmet right on the ball. Boom. Yeah. Knocked it out. So that was one of those late adjustments on them trying to go over the middle with the linebacker help. We'll see if they make further adjustments with that. Because, look, the Vikings have been a heavy zone team all year. They've run a lot of too deep stuff. They don't let things get over the top, so that makes the middle of the field vulnerable. They did run a little bit more matchup zone, which kind of looks like man-to-man in that game against the Giants, because I think they figured, well, we're not that afraid of these Giants receivers. We're willing to play the man-to-man more. And frankly, Richie James and Isaiah Hodgins did really well against Chandon Sullivan and Patrick Peterson. Duke Shelley, they didn't really throw to his side much at all. It was the other two guys that they went after, and I thought the Giants did a real good job attacking them in the middle of the field. So we'll see if they can do that again.
And Shelley's a guy that has emerged as a starter over recent weeks because Cam Dantzler's been dealing with an injury and some personal issues.
Yep.
Once again, if you're Ed Donatel, do you get out of character this late in the season?
Yeah, see, I thought they almost got out of character a little bit in the first game by playing less too deep stuff and more. So do they go back then to what they're used to doing? I don't know.
That's the $1 million
One
question.
of those cat and mouse games.
Yeah,
on
well,
both sides.
and I think both coaching staffs are also wondering, is this the game of all games that you choose to experiment a little when we've been working with one recipe? It's risky if you go down that road.
201-939-4513. All right, guys, we're going to have a lot of callers today, and I got to you later than I wanted to. I apologize. We'll try. Maybe we'll go a couple minutes late if we have to. Sorry, Pearson. But we will try to take as many calls as we can. So let's try to go rapid fire. If you have a main point, let's get to it quickly. Let's keep the small talk to a minimum, and let's get to your point, and we'll try to get as many calls in as possible. Let's start off with Jonathan Westchester. He's up first. Hey, Jonathan, how are you?
Hey, how are you guys?
What's up?
So I feel like the Giants have a tough decision to make this week when it comes to determining who gets a jersey on Sunday and who's inactive.
Explain.
You have guys like Jared Davis and Dane Belton and Lawrence Cager who really stepped up against the Eagles last week. I think Davis had 10 tackles and a half sack. Cager was our leading receiver with 8 catches for almost 70 yards, and Belton had an interception and 6 tackles.
I don't think I'm going to cut you off, Jonathan. I don't think what happened in that Eagles game is going to have a huge impact, except for maybe Jared Davis, because they had not seen him. They had not seen him before. He's also very familiar with the Vikings personnel, being from the NFC North, and he's basically prepared. This is the third time he's preparing for them this year. So I think Davis maybe. And I think maybe a bigger role. Maybe he'll take some snaps away from Jalen Smith and Micah McFadden. That would not shock me in this game. I don't think the other two guys you mentioned, though, are going to really break into the rotation a ton. That's just my feel.
Davis also plays a position where it warrants maybe inserting him in there based on how other previous guys have done. With Belton, you're dealing with the safety position. McKinney just came back. And Cage are also a tight end where you have Bellinger. So I just think that was more of a product of more playing time and opportunity as opposed for them trying to highlight them to determine whether or not they earn more playing time.
I remember Cager's really a receiver in the tight end's body. That guy's not blocking. So if he's on the field, he's almost acting like a receiver. And I don't know you necessarily want to take a guy like Richie James off the field, who despite a couple drop punts and the drop on the slant against Minnesota, he's actually, I think, had a pretty good year as their slot wide receiver, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, his percentage of catch rate is ridiculous.
I was talking to Mike Rowe today. He said it's the best catch percentage since 2018 when Michael Thomas, and who is the other name? He gave me one of the names besides Michael Thomas at that high of a catch rate. But, yeah, he's been very, very good.
Been consistent.
Yeah, I think you guys answered my question. I mean, I don't know if you're willing to do it. I was going to ask you to see if you could predict who the inactive players might be.
I mean, I would have to look.
Placing a bet on this, Jonathan? I mean,
appreciate the call, Jonathan. I mean, I
don't think we've ever done that every single week.
I mean, one of the offensive linemen or two of the offensive linemen probably, right? Cager, Sills, right?
I mean, those guys have normally been healthy scratches.
One of the tight ends probably. Maybe one of the defensive linemen. Do you think Anderson and Mondo are both up with Justin Ellis? Probably not all three of those guys. So one of those guys will probably be down.
Unless you need more protection with Leonard Williams dealing with the neck issue.
Perhaps.
Maybe they go for more insurance if possible.
If Dory Jackson is up or one of the corners down, Rodarius Williams maybe. That's possible.
Yeah, he's been a healthy scratch before.
Yeah, I think those are the guys that I would be looking at, to be honest with you. And I'm before we get a call about it, Kenny Galloway's not going to go out and get. And look, I was happy for Kenny. I've been trying to tell people all year. No one wants to believe me that he's been a good soldier and he's actually been trying real hard and all that stuff. I think we saw that come to fruition last week with the way everybody reacted to him scoring and all that stuff. But maybe he'll get some red zone looks or play 15 snaps instead of 3 or 4. But he's not going to meaningfully take snaps away from a guy like Slayton or a guy like Hodgins, because frankly, those guys have earned those snaps. And they finally got into a rhythm here, Lance, and they've had the same guys out there for a month for the first time all year. I don't think they're going to change that now.
Well, that's why I wouldn't read too much into the Eagles game.
Exactly, correct.
You can't get ultra excited over the fact that they rested the majority of the team. So, of course, Kenny Golladay played 100% of the snaps. And if you play 100% of the snaps, John, you're going to get more targets. You're going to get more opportunities.
Someone's got to catch the ball.
Exactly. But now you bring back Isaiah Hodgins and Richie James and all the usual guys.
Hodgins, James, Slayton, and Bellinger all did not play a single snap in the Eagles game.
Well, Slayton, I think, got out there. He did.
Did he a little bit
Davis
early?
Webb referenced that he did play a snap or two, and I believe he was out. But briefly,
Gotcha.
We're talking about very
like one
minute.
series.
Yeah, if anything. So all of those guys are coming back. You're going to start benching those guys because Kenny Golladay got his first touchdown as a Giant. It doesn't work like that. That's why I would not delve deep into that Eagles game as a result. They're going to go with the guys that got them here. You don't change that up
And in the same way,
after that one game.
that's why I wouldn't take too much about how the Eagles performed in the game either. It's just a weird game, and Hurts, they were being careful with him.
And he wasn't healthy, clearly.
Yes, and
So
even
that's one
the way
reason.
they talked about him after the game, he was really sore. Like,
He refused to answer any questions about his health. I watched the entire presser, John. They pressed him left and
really,
right.
and he didn't say
They,
anything.
he gave short, how you doing? Fine. Next question. You could tell.
He's also a tough guy. He's never going to want to admit that.
No, but you could tell from an optics standpoint, he wasn't himself.
Which tells you that he really wasn't himself.
Yeah, which is
right?
also why they wanted the bye.
Yeah, Slayton played 3 snaps in that
Okay.
game, by the way.
So there
Very
you
good
go.
call. 1 series. Very good.
Yeah.
201-939-4513. Robin Yonkers. No, well, Hugo, right, is next? Sorry about that. Hugo in New Jersey is next. And, Rob, you're right after him, I promise. Hugo, what's going on?
Hey, guys. Good afternoon.
What's
Great
going on?
job, though.
Yep, thank you.
Yep. Well, just going back to this, maybe as a follow-up, one guy from the Philly game that I think might deserve a little bit more of a prominent role is Cordell Flott. And I kind of agree with your earlier comments that Adoree Jackson may not get a full plate of snaps for this game. And when I think about Justin Jefferson, he's kind of a slender receiver with great movement skills. And if you think about our cornerback group, who is the slender dude with great movement skills? It's Cordell Flott.
Wait, time out.
And of
You're suggesting that the Giants going to this game purposely isolating your rookie cornerback Cordell Flott on Justin Jefferson.
No. What I'm suggesting is
Okay, good.
you put Cordell Flott on Jefferson as opposed to Moreau, who's sort of a bigger and maybe he has a little worse movement skills, and give him help over the top, and then use the combination of Moreau, Jackson, McLeod to kind of be erasers on their secondary receivers. So that would be my suggestion for this game.
Well, I think they need to utilize the entire secondary. I don't think you can lean on one guy in particular. I think you want to give these Vikings wide receivers different looks because Jefferson's the type of guy, first of all, he could be doubled and still make ridiculous catches. So at the end of the day, there's only so much. But I think,
In fact, Lance, his touchdown at the one that gave off the block punt had a safety over the top and single coverage underneath.
snuck in between both. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. But
Yeah, look,
I think it makes sense to mix and match.
I didn't think did you think Cordell Flott was some kind of like shutdown corner against the Eagles in the last game of the year?
Well, look, I haven't looked at it all 22, but on TV, I thought he did a pretty good job against A.J. Brown, who actually is a mismatch against him because that's a bigger type of more physical receiver. I see Cordell Flott as the kind of guy you put on, Smith of the Eagles and Jefferson of the Vikings, because he's in and out of breaks really quick, which is what Jefferson does, and he doesn't have to worry that much about the physicality of that receiver.
Justin Jefferson knows how to, get off a jam. I think that's certainly part of that.
I'm not necessarily saying we press him. I'm not suggesting that.
Well,
but I'm
Hugo,
suggesting
if you're going to put a safety over the top, you most certainly should press Justin Jefferson. That's the whole point.
Well,
if you put a safety over the top, you want to pressure him at the line of scrimmage. That would be the plan.
I think you mix it up. I think you mix it up. You may play a little bit of off cover with the safety help, with eyes in the backfield, right? You may do that. You don't have to necessarily.
If you're playing off coverage at the corner, you would not put the safety over the top. You would have a robber inside and more of a bracket situation.
Okay. Well, some type of help is, I guess, what I'm suggesting. It doesn't have to be, a safety shaded over deep.
All right, Hugo. Appreciate the call, man. Honestly, I think you're overthinking it a little bit.
Yeah, I would be surprised if Flott... Well, first of all, Flott's been in the mix. It's not like he hasn't received opportunities, but larger role if Adoree's back, even if Adoree doesn't play much, I still think Wink will rely on his veteran corners when it comes to Justin Jefferson. I don't see him throwing Flott into that situation.
Nick McLeod and Fabian Moreau have been ahead of him on the depth chart the entire year, and Darnay Holmes has been the slot guy the entire year. I would be very surprised if that changed in a playoff game.
I'm with you. I don't see him all of a sudden, increasing his solo looks on Justin Jefferson.
And by the way, that's nothing against Cordell Flott. I would have that same answer to anyone suggesting any rookie gets put up against Justin Jefferson after not being a starter the entire year. Like it's you're just asking a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just you're not putting a player, especially a young player, in a position to thrive. And do you want to do that? It's one thing to experiment like that if this is week 7 of the regular season.
Correct.
It's another thing to do it in a do or die scenario. I don't see Wink putting Cordell Flott in that scenario.
And look, he's trusted Fabian Moreau to cover the other, and this is assuming Adorie's not playing, which we don't know. I think he's probably going to play a little bit, but we'll see. He's used Fabian Moreau in that role the whole year. I'd be surprised if that changed now. But I think he trusts Moreau to, not make mistakes.
Well, do you blame him?
He's such a smart player. Well, he'll give up some catches. He'll get beat. And I think that's really been an underrated part of this Giants secondary this year, Lance. And look, we've seen it in so many other years under so many different coordinators. How many times have we got out of one of these games and said, oh, boy, well, they had 1 or 2 blown coverages where a guy was running wide open free in the secondary. Like, it just doesn't happen very often.
Which is a good sign of everybody being on the same page and the lack of miscommunication, which, to your point, plagued previous defenses. You put a young guy in that scenario where he has not been exposed to during the course of the regular season. I think you're asking for the potential of some of those miscues to rise. And like I said, Jefferson's the type of guy that you could put 2 guys on him. Kirk will still throw something up, and he'll say, I'll take my chances that Jefferson will make a play. Now you want to put Flott on an island where he has to handle himself like that. I think Kirk is going to see that, and I guarantee you Cousins and Kevin O'Connell are going to talk about that on the sideline. They're going to say, if they continue to do that, Kirk, you continue to throw the ball up to Justin Jefferson.
Time.
100%. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, and he mentioned, Flott, he's a longer guy, he's a faster guy, but at the catch point, Cordell Flott's 170 pounds.
And Jefferson's a physical guy. He doesn't look it.
Yeah, he isn't Devontae Smith. Like he's
but
more
he plays like it.
He's more physical than Devontae Smith, in my opinion, at least.
No, I'm completely with you.
201-939-4513. Now we go to Robin Yonkers. Robbie, how are you?
Hey guys, how are you doing?
What's up?
Doing all right.
All right, so I'm jumping straight into it. I'm happy that our defense is back almost at basically 100%. That's good. I'm hoping they keep Adoree Jackson in most of the games, so therefore he could stop any wide receivers trying to do anything. That's for the defense. Now,
well, Rob, by the way, real quick, it's not like you can just put Adoree Jackson on Justin Jefferson and he's going to take care of him. Justin Jefferson can do well against any corner, so just keep that in mind. Don't have that high of expectation. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Now going in straight into the offense, I hope that we go in there with our foot on the gas, and just like we did to the Colts. And I know you guys say this might be a 1-score game, but like I said, I hope we go in with our foot on the gas, and I hope we just basically put them away. And by the maybe by the 4th quarter, we could sit Daniel Jones down. What do you think about that?
I think you're really having dreams of grandeur, Rob.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
Sure. But it's happened in literally one other game this year. And by the way, and the only reason that happened at halftime of the Colts game, frankly, was a defensive score. That wasn't
special
if
teams
not
issues
for that
too.
Landon Collins pick 6 return for a touchdown. That's 17-3 at halftime or whatever.
Yeah.
I think it was 24-3 right at halftime of that Colts
Yeah.
game. So without that Landon Collins pick 6, you're looking at a 17-3 game. Look, I agree. I think you want to score points in this game, but do you mean so? Does that mean you want to throw it a lot more, Rob, and you want to go away from the run early? Like, what are you thinking here?
I'm thinking more run, and I'm maybe about even amount of runs, even amount of throws. Because, like I said, also, and we know who our 3 wide receivers are, which would be Hodges, Darius Slay, and Richie James. I say, hey, if you throw Kenny Galladay in it, if for some reason they give him one-on-one, give him the ball. I believe he'll come down with the ball on a one-on-one because they're not worried about him. Remember that. They're not worried about Kenny Galladay.
Okay. Appreciate the call, Robbie. Thanks for the call, man.
Well, I don't think they're not worried about Kenny Galladay. I mean, they're not certainly shaking in their boots, but that doesn't mean that they're going to leave him wide open in the end zone in the event that he does get some playing time. I knew this was going to happen. I mentioned this on Monday's show.
I've been trying to shut it down all
you've
week.
echoed my sentiments here, but I said it immediately on Monday when I was on with Paul. I said, stop thinking that Kenny Galladay's performance is now going to be an indication of what's happening moving forward, and the coaching staff is going to be benching other players and highly targeting him after this entire time.
Kenny Galladay had 2 catches in that game against the Eagles. One, that great catch in the back of the end zone. How many times was he targeted? He was targeted 7 times. Is 2 catches on 7 targets a very good percentage?
No, and also the guy throwing him the ball is not the guy that's going to be throwing him the ball in this scenario, too. Let's not forget about that. So...
Just saying.
Yeah, you got to have perspective, I think, in this dialogue. With respect to the lopsidedness of the game, the Giants run away with this game if Kirk Cousins and company have a turnover fest, okay? That's how this game gets out of hand.
Correct.
Where the Giants are in a comfort zone. Short of that, just go by the percentages. Once again, you mentioned the Indianapolis Colts game, and I know the Colts built that big lead on the Vikings, which is what I was alluding to. Minnesota and Indianapolis are not in the same ballpark in terms of how the season's played out talent-wise. So that, to me, was an outlier.
Well, by the way, it happened. It's not like the Colts moved the ball up and down the field
No,
in
they
that
got
game.
defensive scores, special teams. Sure,
correct,
yeah,
yeah.
100%. And that's another reason why the Vikings built themselves a deep hole that they all of a sudden jumped into. And then also the Giants, too. Where else have they run away from games? I mean, you mentioned the Indianapolis Colts game. Well, they got a defensive score. When has the offense alone just absolutely shredded an opponent this season, and they've jumped out to a 2-3 touchdown lead? Hasn't happened.
I mean, the goal here is not, let Daniel Jones rest in the second half. Just win the game, man.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to Manny in California who called yesterday. Shout out to Manny. Like, guys, stop acting like this is going to be an easy game. Like, the Vikings are a good team. They won 13 games this year. I understand that their point differential is not great, and that's why it's, in my opinion, a coin flip game, despite the fact that the Vikings were 3.5 games better than the Giants this year with the tie, right? In the loss column, 4 games in the win column. I think these two teams have played relatively similar football this year, to be honest with you. A lot of close games. The Vikings have been, in fact, that's the difference, right? The Giants 8-4-1 in their one-score games, and the Vikings 11-0.
If you include the Philly game, true, but the starters barely played in that game.
Yeah,
so it's more of an
8-3-1
mark if you want to look at the true one-score games in which your main guys play.
Right, and the Vikings are 11-0. What do we say? A 3.5 game difference? There's your 3.5 games. Giants with 3 losses and 1 tie and 1-score games. The Vikings with none. There's your difference in these two teams. How they've performed in 3 1-score games. That's why this game, to the point that we've been making all show, this is probably going to be a close contest.
Well, but the one thing I don't want to hear is, the Vikings are a lucky team. You're not lucky if you win 11 games that way. There's execution that goes into in terms of winning games like that.
I think if you want to make the argument that they're, if they played this same 17-game schedule a bunch of times, they're probably not coming up 13-4
that's
again.
Fair. Sure.
But no, I mean they're a very talented team.
Yeah, I mean Kirk Cousins has 8 game-winning drives. We've seen the field goal kicker dramatically improve when that has been Achilles' heel for the Vikings.
Though he's missed a couple kicks the last couple weeks.
But Greg Joseph also wasn't their kicker for all these years. I'm just talking about if you look at the previous individuals, how many games under Mike Zimmer, their previous coach, did they walk off on the losing end because the field goal kicker missed?
Yeah, the Vikings
after Kirk got them in field goal.
Yeah, the Vikings and Bears just continually shot themselves in the foot.
Yeah, so that has changed too. And they also have big-time playmakers. Remember, Jefferson, Hawkinson, Thielen, K.J. Osborne. Now you add Irv Smith Jr., Dalvin Cook. That's a lot of firepower. That is no picnic for the Giants' defense, regardless of whether or not they can win in the trenches.
201-939-4513. 201-939-4513. Hey, Giant fans, take your fandom to the next level with a season ticket membership. Stay connected to the club all year round. They're not just on game days. Memberships are now available for the 2023 season. To learn more about all the exclusive member benefits, visit Giants.com/tickets. Limited inventory is available. Big Blue Kickoff Live is brought to you by Pepsi Zero Sugar. New and improved. Zero never tasted so good. Alan in D.C. is up next. Hey, Alan, long time no speak, man.
Hey, what's up, guys, man? Dynamic Duo is back, man. It's good to see you guys, man.
What's up?
Hey, man, I'm just, I'm just happy that we're getting healthy and our defense is starting to get back, man. And I think this might be the first time all season we could see Dexter Lawrence, Leonard Williams, Thibodeau, McKinney, Jackson, and Ojulari all together. So, I really like our chances on defense. But, Justin Jefferson is going to command a lot of attention, and rightfully so. He's probably one of the best in the league. But we cannot let Hawkinson go off because he killed us. I think he had 2 touchdowns last game.
Yeah, 2.
Played him.
Yeah.
And, I'm thinking, defense wins championships, and in our history, a lot of our Super Bowl history and all that is based on really, really good defenses. So I just hope that our guys show up and we limit those guys like Hawkinson and Cook and even guys like Thielen. Let Jefferson get his and and limit the other guys. And I think that might be a recipe for a better outcome for us this time. Thanks, guys.
You
Thanks,
got it.
Alan.
Yeah, well, I mean, the other factor, too, that, should not be overlooked, it wasn't just the fact that the Vikings moved the ball, it was the fact that they finished drives. And remember, the red zone defense for the Giants has been consistent. Minnesota, though, was 3 of 4 in the red zone.
And they've had a very good red zone offense all year long.
Absolutely. So you could argue, okay, if you know based on what the last caller said, the Vikings are going to get theirs, right? They're going to be able to move the ball. They're going to make plays. They just have too many good players. Well, how did the Giants then operate inside the 20? When the Vikings get into that territory, that probably will say an awful lot about this game because Minnesota did a good job finishing drives. And
Hawkinson
that's where,
and Jefferson are the guys that finished them,
yeah,
too.
and those contested catches. Because one of the Hawkinson touchdowns, remember, was where Cousins put it in a place where he jumped over Hawkinson.
The wheel route on the left side.
But, I mean, he had to go out in front, grab the ball, and then bring it back to his body. Darnay Holmes was involved in that play. Julian Love was involved in that play. I mean, you got to tip your cap. That was a heck of an athletic play by T.J. Hawkinson, and I don't think he gets enough credit for his athleticism because he's not known as an elusive guy.
Well, he wasn't
like
used that way in Detroit. I
Yeah.
don't know why, but he wasn't.
Well, that's why Minnesota gladly said, you don't want him anymore? We'll
He's
take
a
him
really
on.
good player.
Yeah, and he's made a heck of a difference for them. You look at his numbers, how highly targeted he is, and the chemistry that he and Kirk Cousins have built, and he's a big guy. So, it's not easy for a safety to play him. It's not easy for a linebacker to play
Yeah,
him.
him versus Landon Collins, I think, is quietly a pretty important matchup in this game. 'Cause I imagine they're going to get matched up a couple times over the course of this game, and how does Landon cover him as that kind of hybrid linebacker type of player? I think that'll be fun to watch.
And on this topic, just a related note, we were talking about the usage of Dalvin Cook and Saquon Barkley. Dalvin, we've seen, especially in that Indianapolis Colts game when he caught that screen pass and then took it to the house. I wonder if Minnesota says, okay, we're not going to run the ball because clearly they've made that a point of emphasis, but maybe they get him more involved as a targeted receiver.
Yeah. And, he's had a couple games this year where he's had 5 or 6 catch-ups, but not really against the Giants in that game. They kind of helped. He used a lot in pass protection, so he didn't go out for as many passes in that game. And the Vikings did do well with screens against the Giants in that first game, too.
And that's why I bring up Cook in that regard.
But they didn't really involve Cook. It was mostly wide receiver and tight end screens in that game. I wonder if they'll kind of break out a couple running back screens.
Well,
that's a good point.
To your point, though, if they feel they need Cook as an extra line of defense with their offensive line, that's more of a reason why they lean on the other personnel. Remember, Jefferson's screen set up the game-winning field goal for Greg Joseph.
Yeah, and Hawkinson had a couple long catches, too, on screen passes. Maybe one was Hawkinson, one was a different tight end. Let's go to Andrew on Long Island. He's up next. Andrew, what's going on?
Hey, what's going on? How you guys doing?
We're good.
You're right.
It's gonna be a tough game, but I think we got it. I feel like if we run the ball between Jones and Barkley 20-25 times, I think we have a good shot. I think you have to put the ball in the playmakers' hands. I think this is the time to do it.
Yeah, and Andrew, by the way, here's an interesting nugget, too. Daniel Jones.
Talking baseball,
I
Andrew
don't know
Jones?
where Andrew
Braves,
James came to my
Yankees
head.
outfielder. What do you
Jeez.
think? What type of an
I have
impact will he have on this game?
Huge.
Do you think he'll be used deep down in center field
Well, of course
territory?
he uses a center fielder.
Okay,
Of course.
fair enough.
That's his natural position.
Yeah, but does he have the range, though, to help out in terms of the
Not
safety?
anymore. He used to.
Yeah.
Jones ran 4 times for 34 yards in that game. All 4 of those runs, however, came on scrambles. The Giants did not call a single solitary designed Daniel Jones run in that game. Not one. And I think part of the reason is they run a lot of zone defense, the Vikings, so a lot of times some of the design stuff doesn't work as well. But I'm curious to see if they make that a little bit more of in the package this week, using him on design runs rather than just as a scrambler, Andrew. Great point.
They also have really good
I got
linebackers.
one more
I think
quick
that's
thing.
why maybe they didn't have Daniel Jones run, because Hicks and Kendricks are really good in terms of being in position to make tackles.
Yes. I got one more quick thing. I don't know if you guys have the stats on Daniel Jones, his passing attempts for the games that we won this year compared to the ones that we lost. Is there any type of stats on that?
I mentioned earlier, I don't know how long you've been listening, Andrew, that the 2 games the 2 games when he threw for 40 or more, they lost. They lost to the Lions and the Vikings. So we were indicating, at least I was emphasizing, I don't think it's a recipe for success if you have him get into that territory again, because that usually has not led to good results.
And again, a lot of that's game
So we
flow,
got to do,
too.
we got to pound that ball. That's it. That's the game plan, pound the ball.
All right, Andrew, appreciate the call. And that's interesting because we talk about how well they played the first game, but they didn't pound the ball in the first game. So that's why I love these games where these 2 teams played recently, and especially when, like, weird things happen in the first game, like teams don't play the way like they usually do, and I think it's a fascinating matchup, to be honest with you. 201-939-4513. Hi, Charlie.
Hey, guys.
What's up?
Hey, Lance, you missed me?
Tremendously.
He was actually telling me at lunch today, Charlie, how much he wanted you to call in today.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I knocked
Hey,
this
look,
off my bucket list for the week.
What do you got? Let's get to it.
Hey, look, I'm glad you guys kind of straightened things out a little bit because I think Giants fans are getting a little bit too cocky about this game. I mean, look, the last 7 games we're 2-4-1. It isn't like we're going in there with a ton of momentum. And the Vikings probably won 4 out of the last 5 games, something like that. I don't have the exact stat.
Well, how about the fact that they're 8-1 at home? I think that's probably the best statistic to throw out. They are very good taking advantage of their home base this season.
Yeah, exactly. And then we're going to the playoff. We're the playoff game, and Nick Gates has to say, like, boy, that crowd's not that loud. Well, you wait till Sunday; they're going to be really loud. I just think that there's going to be a lot of turnovers in this game. I think it's going to be a blowout. I really do, one way or the other. But I think most likely Vikings. Because I think there's going to be turnovers, and whoever can score 7 and not 3 off the turnovers. Remember, look, the Vikings, we can say we win the defense compared to the Vikings defense, but they win the offense and they win special teams. So they got 2 out of the 3. To me, they're definitely a better team. Kirk Cousins got something to prove. I listened to his presser the other day, and he sounds calm, confident, excited about playing at home in a game that's one and done. He says, it wasn't like he was scared about it. He felt like this is why you play football.
I remember, Kirk Cousins has won a playoff. People seem to forget that. Kirk Cousins won an overtime playoff game against a very good New Orleans Saints team a few years back. So it's not like this guy has been kryptonite in the playoffs here or anything like that. He's had, as much as Howard Cross and me go back and forth on Cousins, he's had success in the playoffs. He has, period.
And he also beat the Saints also again in that corner Kyle Rudolph touchdown in the end zone. That was another playoff game.
Yeah,
that was on the road.
I think that was the same one, right? Isn't that what
No, because the walk-off with the Minnesota Miracle, I think you're talking about.
No, that wasn't Cousins.
That's right. That was Case Keenum.
That was Case Keenum.
That's right. Yeah. Okay, so you are referencing then the one to Kyle Rudolph against the Saints.
Yep.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, so to me it's just like we've got to we got to keep them under 24 points because I don't think we're going to score more than 24 points. So if we can do that, I think we have a chance to win. Barkley's got to have a big game, and they're going to try to stop the run. I don't know. I just think it's going to be a blowout. I'm saying it's 35-24 Vikings. That's my prediction.
All right, Charlie, thanks for the call. And look, if the Giants give it 35 points, they're in trouble. They're in trouble. I mean, the Giants have eclipsed 30 points once in 4 years. Or was it 3 years, whatever? I forget what the date was.
You got to go back to Week 5, 2020.
Yeah,
the last
so
time
basically 3
they
seasons,
got past 30,
right?
Yeah.
And
43 games to be exact, for those of you counting at home.
That's a lot.
Yes, just a tad.
So if the Giants give up 30 in this game, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem. But, can the Giants score 24-27 and maybe get to 28 in this game? Yeah, I think it's not out of the question. But if the Vikings gets past 30, I think you're getting out of the type of game the Giants are comfortable winning.
Well, because once again, it's a bit of uncharted territory.
Exactly.
Right?
Now, they can.
You haven't seen enough, but you didn't have enough sample size to say, they can definitely operate like that. Now, in terms of the last point, I could see that Vikings saying to themselves, Daniel Jones has 2 games over 300 yards this season. We got an interception off of him. Let's see if he can do it again.
And a strip fumble, remember?
Let's see. Correct. Mm-hmm. Let's see if Daniel can beat us. I could see Ed Donatel thinking like that, meaning we're going to emphasize, we're going to make sure Saquon doesn't damage this game. We're going to contain him. And then let's see if Daniel Jones and Richie James and Isaiah Hodgins can make as many plays as they did a few weeks ago.
Right.
I could definitely see Ed Donatel in the defensive meeting room thinking like that. Guys, as long as we don't let Saquon go off for 100 yards and multiple touchdowns, let this be a Daniel game, and let's see if he can, once again, rise to the occasion. I don't think that's crazy at all in terms of that being the thought process.
And based on what we saw in the first game, it looked like he could. But then you got to see if he could do it again.
Correct. Because once again, I think coaches, they also look at the numbers. They may not delve into the statistics like crazy, but you're going to tell me they don't look at the fact that the Lions and the Vikings game was the only time that he threw for over 300 yards? Wouldn't you rather take your chances and seeing if he could do that again versus letting Saquon get comfortable and make a number of explosive plays? Because they saw Saquon had that 20-plus yard touchdown run at the end right before the 2-point conversion to set up the game-tying score. And then, of course, the Vikings got into field goal range. So they understand Saquon could do damage. And they also, I'm sure, have noticed when they run the ball and pound the ball at least 30 times, the Giants are 9-0-1.
Yep. And Lance, the caller asked for it, so I'll give it to him. In Giants losses, I'll be quick. 37 pass attempts for Jones against Dallas in September. Their next loss came against Seattle, 31 pass attempts for Jones.
Here we go.
44 against Detroit, 35 against Dallas, 31 in the tie against Washington, and 42 in the loss to Minnesota. In their wins, 21. The outlier is Carolina in week 2. They threw it 34 times. That's the outlier game. Next set of wins, 13, 27, 27, 30, 17, 32, and 24. So that's what you're looking at in terms of passing attempts in the win. So in every win but one, they had 30 or fewer pass attempts. In every loss, they had more than 30 pass attempts.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of that is you get a lead, you run the ball more, though it's not like the Giants were playing from ahead in many or any of these games. They came back and won a lot of these games in the first half of the year. They were behind the fourth quarter against the Ravens and
Tennessee.
Yeah, exactly. So whatever, and I'm not a big person to apply to if X number of runs, it means you win the game. Like, I'm not that guy. But
it's just been a statistical trend, that's all.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
201-939-4513. Hey, fans, go download Giants TV, the Giants official connected TV streaming app. It brings original video content and game highlights on demand and direct to Big Blue fans. Giants TV is free on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire TV and the Giants mobile app. Right here on Big Blue Kickoff Live, brought to you by Pepsi Zero Sugar. New and improved. Zero never tasted so good. We'll do 2 more calls before we say goodbye, and we'll lead off with Rick in New Rochelle. Rickford.
Yeah, hi. I'm happy to see that the defensive front four is playing well, but I'm a little concerned with the game against Minnesota a few weeks ago. Minnesota ran 3 wide receiver screens, 1 to the left, 2 to the right, that gained big yardage. And the last one put them in position for that 61-yard field goal.
Yeah, the Giants also shut down 2 or 3 of those as well. They were kind of really, and that's what screens kind of are, Rick. They're kind of hit or miss, right? That corner, I think Darnay Holmes made a really nice play on one, crashing down on Jefferson.
Collins made a good
Collins
play too,
made one on, I think, on Jefferson early in the game. So you're right. They did have a couple, and even 1 or 2 to the tight end too, Rick, that hurt the Giants. But there are other plays, and it's all a matter of them timing those up, right? When the Vikings are calling those, they're anticipating a Giants blitz. And they're hoping they catch one of the corners coming on a corner blitz, or, the Giants being unbalanced where one side of the line is coming and then there's a lot of open space there. And they're hoping to time them up. So that's going to be a real cat and mouse game between Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings offensive staff against Wink Martindale, trying to time up those screens to try to catch in the Giants in some of those looks where they can get some of those big gains.
Unfortunately, they became big yardage plays, though.
Well, that's the whole point of the
15,
design,
17,
sure.
18-yard gains.
Yeah. Well, because, just think about it, Rick. It's a numbers game. If you, on a blitz, sent a corner, now the Vikings have more personnel up the field than you do because you're down a guy. So, of course, it's going to lead to a big play. That's why I referenced the Jefferson play. He gained 17 yards before the field goal attempt. Mm-hmm. He gets maybe 12. Who knows? Maybe Greg Joseph doesn't drill the 61-yard field goal.
They probably don't even try to kick it.
Yeah. So, it changes the dynamics an awful lot. That's why tackling and being in position to have a good read on what the Vikings' tendencies are could be the difference in a game like this, especially if you don't get home at the quarterback, because they got a lot of elusive playmakers. And you just referenced they didn't use just Jefferson on those design screens. They used a variety of guys, and they could very well use Dalvin Cook too, because he has shown that if he could get out in open space, he can hustle and get down the field and do some damage.
I thought I looked up what the Vikings did on screen passes in that game, and I thought I put it in my game preview story.
Sure, about the volume?
Yeah, I actually had. I think it was. I'll go off the top of my head here, folks, and if the number's wrong, I apologize.
What is that line? The Vikings tried to counter those blitz
here we go.
tendencies?
With screen passes, their tight ends receivers. According to Pro Football Focus, see, Lance, you found the faster than I did. I'm the one that wrote the damn thing.
Sometimes my eyes cooperate.
Yes. Cousins completed 6 of 7 screen attempts for 50 yards in the game.
That's pretty nice. Yep.
And again, 2 or 3 of those I think probably went for no gain. So the 3 that worked, do the average. You're looking at 15 or 16 yards per reception there. So
You'll
I
still
Rick,
take
you're
those
right.
odds if
Rick,
you're the Vikings?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think Rick, you make a good point. All right, let's go to our final caller of the program is Scott in New Mexico. Scotty Doo.
Hey guys, how you doing today?
What's up?
Doing all right, Scott.
I'll make it brief. Interesting statistic. Daniel Jones, every time he throws the ball, is 6.8. You'd think that Cousins would have a larger percentage, but he's only 7.1.
Is that what is that? Yard per attempt? Yards per
catch,
completion?
right.
Yards per completion or
catch.
yards per attempt?
Yards per attempt, I believe.
Okay.
And the interesting stat that I was looking at, which you've sort of identified, Daniel Jones has been sacked 44 times, but believe it or not, Cousins has been sacked 46 times.
Yeah.
So my question to you guys is, we already know that the Giants are the top blitzing team in the NFL. Do you think strategically, I always feel that the game is going to be won in the trenches despite everything else, all the histrionics that are going around it, because whoever wins the trenches wins the game, because they are evenly matched, as you've already ascribed to. So do you think strategically that the Giants can rush 4, or do they have to rush, or do they have to follow the same pattern that Wink Martindale's been doing and actually maybe even blitz more than they did before? And I'll take your answers off the air, guys.
Thank you, Scott. Look, I don't think they do. Based on what we saw in that first game, with the way Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams play, now, the strength of the Vikings' offensive line were those 2 tackles. I thought they did a really nice job against Thibodeau, and again, Ojulari only played half that game because of the ankle. But I thought O'Neal and Darisaw, who's their left tackle, O'Neal was their right tackle, did a great job protecting the edges for Cousins. The Giants' edge rushers really didn't do squat in that game. Ojulari had the 1 sack. I think otherwise they had 1 pressure between the 2 of them over the course of the game. The Giants did their damage inside, but now O'Neal's not there. So I think you could probably make the argument Wink maybe doesn't have to blitz as much, and you can trust your guys to get home because you like some of those one-on-one matchups. But I'll go back to what we talked about something earlier in the show with the cornerbacks, right? The Giants have operated one way all year. Fabian Moreau's been covering the best guy since Adori's been out. And Wink Martindale blitzes. That's what – you want to talk about something being in somebody's DNA? Blitz is Wink Martindale's freaking DNA. That's what they do. They like the way it makes offenses adjust and get put in difficult situations, having to worry about that pressure. So, maybe it won't be the 50% rate they did in the last game. Maybe it'll only be 40% because you do trust the guys up front to get home and you want to protect against some of their explosive playmakers and the screens that we talked about. But Wink ain't coming out here and having a 20% blitz rate in this game. It's just not happening. It's just not happening.
He's in attack mode, right? I mean, that's his style. He even said that when he spoke to the media the other day. So that would be an example of Wink getting completely out of character, which I don't see happening. Now, could he feel a little bit better about having some reinforcements in the secondary? Perhaps, but remember, I think
that means maybe he blitzes more.
Yeah, but also correct because he feels comfortable. Yeah. But I still think Adori's a wild card in this game because we just don't know. A, is he going to play? B, how much, if he does play, will he be involved? And therefore, you're going to have to rely on more of Fabian and some of these other guys, which means you're pretty much back to square one in the first matchup. And I don't see Wink being of the philosophy, even if he thinks he can get home with 4 guys, let's give Kirk Cousins a comfortable pocket because Kirk has proven this season, he will carve teams up. His numbers have been very solid. He may not be a guy that, you're going to put atop the list of your rankings, but you could do far worse than Kirk Cousins. And I don't think they want him to feel very comfortable in this game because when you do get into his face, maybe you fluster him, you force him to press the envelope, and that's how you get him into a precarious spot for a turnover. So,
and he's not elusive. He's not exactly running away from guys back there.
So that's more of a reason why, John, you feel good. If you are going to send the house at him, he's not going to get out of the pocket and burn you for a 10-yard run.
No, he's going to throw it up to a playmaker and hope they make a play, and you hope your guys are good enough to prevent it. That's basically that's the gamble you're taking when you send the blitz. Yeah. Because Kirk will throw it up. And look, when you throw it to Justin Jefferson, I can't really blame the dude. I'd be willing to just throw it up to that guy too. But can your guys win those one-on-one situations, which is very difficult. That's why Justin Jefferson's Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, if you're going up against Jalen Hurts, it's a little bit different because that could prove costly if you
Correct.
don't get home. But Kirk's not going to do that. And you go back to that Buffalo Bills game where the Vikings won in the extra session and Jefferson made that ridiculous fourth down conversion.
He just chucked it.
Yeah, well, Kirk told him before they had that play, Justin, I'm probably just going to throw something up at you, and we'll hope for the best. Well, that's exactly what happened.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, that's the type of guy he is, Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, so PFF tracked Cousins against the blitz. I mentioned this before the first game. During the year, Cousins' numbers against the blitz were not terrible, but it is still towards the lower end of the quarterbacks. Just he doesn't have that elusiveness to avoid the blitz and stuff like that. But in the game specifically against the Giants, he actually was okay against the blitz. And this is what PFF had. Again, you can take it with a grain of salt, whatever, but I'm not going back there and tracking every blitz and seeing what he did. So I'm going to take their numbers and trust them. 15 of 24, 171 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 sacks. So it's not great. It's not phenomenal, but it's not bad either.
But I'd still want him to feel a little bit uncomfortable
Sure.
than have him sit back there in a comfortable pocket because I'm only bringing 4 guys.
Now, the other interesting one, the Giants did do 6, again, this is according to PFF. They did 6-0 blitz looks. And for fans that don't know, that means no safety help. You're just manned up. He didn't complete any passes in those situations.
Well, and I'm sure Wink is looking at those numbers and that success rate.
And with McKinney there now and maybe Adoree Jackson, and maybe that's when you have, right, if you limit the snaps, maybe, all right, well, we're going to play zero coverage here. We want that dude on the field because we trust him more than we trust some of the other guys, right? So, look, I think that's where the Giants are right now, and that's where the Vikings are, and I think it's going to be a fun cat and mouse game given they just played, and like I said, based on the way these two teams have played all year, I would expect this game to be close in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I stand by. It gets out of hand if one of these teams is just turnover crazy and they give gifts to the opposition, unbelievable field position, and a team jumps out to an early lead and puts themselves, the opposition rather, in a hole. I mean, that's, to me, the way that this game gets out of hand because, once again, it was 13-10. I think if you ask most people, they probably don't remember. It was a 3-point game and a low-scoring game entering the fourth quarter of that contest.
Lance, good stuff.
Absolutely.
And you could check out Lance and I, along with Paul Dottino and Jonathan Casillas, on our pregame show on Sports Radio 66 WFAN, also 101.9 FM as well. On Sunday, pregame starts at 2:15. Pardon me. The kickoff is at 4:40. Again, the pregame at 2:15. Kickoff at 4:40. You can tune in on the radio here or go to the Odyssey app, and you can check that out. You can link through WFN.com if you want to listen digitally for that pregame show. And, of course, we'll be with you after the game. Lance will be anchoring back in the studio. I'll be in the locker room getting all the reaction, and we will cover what hopefully will be a Giants victory, and then we can do it all again next week.
Well, this is it. It's one game. You either move on or you head home.
No question.
This is where it counts.
Big Blue Kickoff Live was brought to you by Pepsi Zero Sugar. We are thrilled to have them along as a sponsor. New and improved, zero never tasted so good, Pepsi Zero Sugar. For Lance Medow, I'm John Schmeelk. We're back on Monday, win, lose, or draw at 12:30. That'll be Paul Dottino and Howard Cross on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Otherwise, we'll see you on Sunday afternoon. Everybody enjoy your super wild card weekend.